Ladies and gentlemen, imagine standing at the edge of a great ocean, watching the waves crash against the shore. For so long you have waited, feeling the weight of time pressing against your heart. You have prayed, hoped, and wondered when things would change. You have questioned if God has heard you, if He has seen your struggles, if He has remembered the dreams He placed inside you. And now, after what seems like endless waiting, the tide is shifting. The wind is rising. The doors that once seemed locked are beginning to open. This is not a coincidence. This is not a mere change of luck. This is the moment God has been preparing you for all along. The delays were never denials. They were divine preparations. The silence was never abandonment. It was a season of refining. And now heaven is calling. Your waiting is over, and a major shift is here. Are you ready? Will you step forward in faith, or will you hesitate, questioning the timing of the one who created time itself? Today, you stand on the edge of something greater than you have imagined. The question is not whether God is ready. The question is, are you? God's work operates on a timeline beyond human understanding, and His movements are never rushed, nor are they delayed. We often find ourselves caught in the tension between our desires and His perfect timing, struggling with the silence that follows fervent prayers. It is in these seasons of waiting that faith is refined, patience is stretched, and trust is tested. However, when God declares that the waiting is over, it is not an arbitrary decision, but a deliberate, divine orchestration that ensures everything aligns according to His purpose. Many of the greatest stories of faith in history are marked by prolonged seasons of waiting before an appointed moment of action. Joseph endured years of slavery and imprisonment before stepping into his destiny as a ruler in Egypt. David was anointed as king long before he ascended to the throne. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years before entering the promised land. In each of these cases, the waiting was not wasted. It was a necessary preparation for the fulfillment of God's promises. Yet, when the time came, when God's voice declared, "Now is the moment," everything changed swiftly and decisively. God's timing does not adhere to human expectations. We mark time by calendars and deadlines, growing impatient when circumstances do not unfold as quickly as we desire. But divine timing operates beyond our comprehension. Sometimes delays are not denials, but rather divine appointments in disguise, positioning us where we need to be for what comes next. The unseen work God accomplishes during seasons of waiting is often greater than what we can perceive. It is in these moments of stillness that He shapes our character, strengthens our faith, and removes obstacles we may not even recognize. When the shift comes, it often happens suddenly. A door that remained shut for years swings open in an instant. An opportunity that seemed impossible materializes out of nowhere. The burden of waiting is lifted, and the clarity we longed for becomes evident. In these moments, it becomes clear that God was always working, even in what seemed like silence. His plans are never rushed, but when He moves, the change is undeniable. The key to embracing this shift is recognizing when the moment arrives. Many miss their divine appointments because they have become too accustomed to waiting. They hesitate when God calls them forward, fearing the unknown, clinging to the comfort of what is familiar. But when God says, "Now is the time," there is no room for doubt. He does not call without making a way. The challenge is to trust that He has gone ahead, preparing the path, aligning circumstances, and equipping us for what lies ahead. The waiting season has an expiration date, and when it arrives, faith must replace hesitation. God does not delay without reason, nor does He move prematurely. He calls His people forward when the moment is right, ensuring that all things work together in perfect harmony. The shift is not a surprise to Him. It is the fulfillment of His plan. When God initiates a shift, it is not merely a change in circumstances, but a profound realignment of one's life, purpose, and calling. It is not random or accidental. Rather, it is a divine intervention designed to move a person from one season into another. Such moments often come with a sense of urgency, an unmistakable feeling that something is stirring, even if it is not yet fully visible. This is because God's movements are precise. He does not act without intention, nor does he push someone forward without adequate preparation. A shift does not always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it begins as a subtle stirring in the heart, a restlessness that makes one realize that the current season is drawing to a close. There may be a growing discomfort in remaining where one has been, as if the soul itself is yearning for something greater. This is not dissatisfaction, but a spiritual awakening, a realization that God is preparing something new. However, this shift also requires a willingness to move forward. Many times people resist because they have grown comfortable in what is familiar, even if it no longer serves their purpose. God's calling into a new season requires faith, not explanations. The path ahead is rarely fully revealed. Instead, he provides just enough light for the next step. This is intentional, for if every detail were disclosed, trust would be unnecessary. Faith is not built on knowing exactly how everything will unfold, but on believing that God is leading, even when the way seems unclear. A shift often requires leaving behind what was once secure, whether it is a place, a position, a mindset, or even certain relationships. This is not because these things were wrong, but because they have served their purpose, and clinging to them would hinder the next stage of the journey. Resistance to change is a natural human instinct. Fear whispers that stepping into the unknown is risky, that staying in familiar territory is safer. However, comfort zones can become prisons when they prevent growth. God does not call people to stagnation. He calls them to movement, to transformation, to becoming who they were meant to be. And so, when the shift comes, it requires courage. It demands a willingness to trust that God's plans are far greater than anything that could be imagined. What follows a divine shift is always greater than what came before. The challenges faced in the previous season were not wasted. They were part of the preparation. Every hardship, every delay, every closed door was shaping a person for what is coming. But when God declares that the time has come, hesitation must give way to obedience. The question is not whether the shift will happen. It will. The real question is whether one will embrace it or resist it. Those who trust and step forward in faith will find themselves exactly where they were always meant to be, stepping into a destiny that was prepared long before they even realized it. When God orchestrates a major shift, it often requires a departure from the old ways of thinking, living, and believing. The human heart, by nature, clings to what is familiar, even when it no longer serves its purpose. There is a tendency to hold on to past experiences, past identities, and past failures as if they define the future. But when God calls someone into a new season, the baggage of the old cannot come along. There is a shedding process, a necessary surrender that clears the path for transformation. This release is not always easy. There are attachments that seem too strong to break, fears that whisper that stepping forward means stepping into uncertainty, but holding on to what was can keep one from stepping into what will be. The past has its place. It was a teacher, a foundation, a season of growth, but it is not meant to be a prison. When God moves, he calls people to let go of what is behind, trusting that what is ahead is greater. Often this means releasing not only physical things, but internal burdens as well. Regret, guilt, disappointment. These weights slow down the journey forward. Many people hesitate to embrace a divine shift because they feel unworthy, unprepared, or undeserving. But God does not ask for perfection. He asks for trust. His calling is not based on human qualifications, but on his purpose. When he declares that the waiting is over, it means he has already made provision for what is next. The only thing required is a willingness to walk into it. This process of letting go is also a test of faith. It reveals whether one truly believes that God is in control. If he is, then nothing lost is truly lost, and nothing left behind was ever necessary for the new season. Sometimes, what is being held onto is nothing more than an illusion of security. The only true security lies in God himself, not in circumstances, possessions, or even personal plans. Learning to release these things is not a loss. It is a gain. It is the freedom to move forward unhindered, to receive what God has prepared with open hands instead of clenched fists. One of the greatest challenges in this transition is the unknown. When God asks for surrender, he rarely reveals every detail of what comes next, but this is intentional. If everything were clear, faith would not be necessary. God does not want people to trust in a plan. He wants them to trust in him. Letting go, then, is an act of worship, an act of placing one's future into the hands of the one who holds all things together. In the end, what God is asking to be released is never more valuable than what he is preparing to give. The willingness to let go determines the ability to receive. The sooner one surrenders the past, the sooner they step into the fullness of what has been waiting for them all along. When God moves, he does so with purpose, precision, and perfect timing. But often before a great shift occurs, there is a period of discomfort, a sense of restlessness that stirs deep within the soul. It is the divine signal that something is changing, even before it becomes visible. This stirring is not random. It is God's way of preparing the heart, mind, and spirit for what is to come. Too often people ignore these inner promptings, dismissing them as mere emotions or passing thoughts. But in reality, they are the whispers of God, urging his people to wake up and take notice. The human mind craves stability, predictability, and routine. Change, especially divine change, often comes as a disruption to that comfort. It is easy to settle into rhythms that feel safe, but safety is not always the same as growth. When God is about to shift a person into a new season, he first unsettles them. The things that once felt comfortable may begin to feel restrictive. The situations that once brought fulfillment may no longer satisfy. This is not a sign of failure or lack of direction. It is evidence that God is calling for movement. This divine restlessness is a mercy. It prevents stagnation, urging the soul to seek more. It is a signal that the waiting period is ending and action is required. But responding to this call requires discernment. Not every feeling of discomfort is from God, and not every urge to move is divinely inspired. This is why it is crucial to stay close to him in prayer, seeking his wisdom and guidance. When he stirs the heart, he also provides clarity to those who seek it. There is danger in resisting this call. Many times, God moves people forward, but they hesitate, clinging to the familiar out of fear. They convince themselves that the stirring is nothing more than fleeting emotion, that perhaps they have misheard or misunderstood, but delay can lead to missed opportunities. When God signals that it is time to move, lingering too long can result in doors closing, relationships shifting, or circumstances becoming more difficult. He is patient, but he also expects obedience. Responding to divine restlessness requires courage. It demands trust in the unseen and faith in what has not yet fully unfolded. But history, both biblical and personal, shows that God never calls without providing. Every great movement in Scripture began with a stirring, a call, a divine invitation to step beyond comfort and into purpose. Those who responded in faith experienced the fullness of his plans. Those who hesitated often found themselves wandering. God's call to movement is never for destruction, but for growth. It is an invitation to leave behind what no longer serves his purpose, and to embrace what he has been preparing all along. To ignore the stirring is to risk missing the shift entirely, but to recognize it, to lean into it, and to trust the one who is orchestrating it, That is the key to stepping into the fullness of His plan. When God initiates a shift, it is not merely about external circumstances changing. It is about internal transformation. Many people long for a breakthrough, yet they remain unaware that the greatest preparation for what is coming is the refining of the heart, mind, and spirit. Before He entrusts anyone with a new season, He ensures they are ready to handle it. This readiness is not about talent, knowledge, or outward qualifications. It is about spiritual maturity and alignment with His will. God refines through trials, through delays, and through seasons of waiting that test faith, endurance, and obedience. The waiting itself is never wasted time. It is sacred preparation. However, when the shift is near, the nature of the preparation changes. What once felt like long stretches of silence may suddenly feel like intense pressure. This is because in His divine wisdom, God accelerates the final moments of preparation. The things that could be overlooked in a long season of waiting can no longer be ignored. Old fears, unresolved doubts, hidden insecurities. These things must be confronted because they cannot enter the next chapter. There is a temptation to rush forward, to force movement before the inner work is complete, but God is not merely interested in positioning people for change. He desires that they be transformed to sustain it. Those who step into new seasons without allowing God to prepare their character often find themselves unable to handle the weight of the blessing. Promotion without preparation can feel like a burden rather than a breakthrough. This is why, just before the shift, God often presses deeply into areas of the heart that still need refining. This refining process is not comfortable. It may come in the form of unexpected challenges, difficult conversations, or internal struggles that seem to arise out of nowhere. But these are not signs of failure. They are signs that God is removing what no longer serves His purpose. He is ensuring that the baggage of the past does not become a stumbling block in the future. In these moments, the key is to surrender, to allow Him to complete the work He has begun rather than resisting the discomfort. Many people misunderstand this final stage of preparation. They assume that hardship means they are off track, when in reality, it often means they are closer than ever to the breakthrough. The enemy will try to use these moments to create doubt, to make people question whether they are truly ready or if God has forgotten them. But those who remain steadfast, who press into God rather than pulling away, will find that they emerge stronger, lighter, and fully prepared for what He has been leading them toward all along. The shift is not just about where God is taking someone, it is about who they are becoming in the process. When they embrace this final refining, they step into the new season, not just with changed circumstances, but with a transformed spirit, ready to carry the weight of God's calling with wisdom, humility, and unwavering faith. When the moment of divine shift arrives, it is not subtle or uncertain. It comes with a clarity that cannot be ignored, a deep stirring in the soul that signals something irreversible is taking place. Those who have been waiting, preparing, and enduring through the trials will recognize it not as a gradual transition, but as a sudden unveiling of what God has been orchestrating all along. This is the moment when what once seemed distant is suddenly at hand, when doors that remained locked for years swing open, and when the calling that felt like a distant promise becomes an immediate reality. God's movement is swift and decisive. He does not hesitate when the time is right. Many people misunderstand divine timing, assuming that it operates on human schedules, but when He moves, there is no room for delay. Those who have been faithful in the waiting must be prepared to respond immediately, for hesitation can mean missing the very opportunity they have prayed for. It is in this moment that obedience is tested. Not just in faithfulness during the waiting, but in the willingness to step forward without fear when the shift finally comes. There is a temptation to second guess, to wonder if this is truly the moment or if more preparation is needed. But when God calls, He provides all that is necessary. The shift is not based on human readiness, but on divine appointment. It is not about whether one feels qualified, but whether one is willing to trust that God's power is sufficient. The moment demands courage because stepping into a new season often means leaving behind the familiar. What was once a place of comfort and security may no longer serve His purpose, and holding on to the past can become an obstacle to embracing the future. God's major shifts are never about personal gain alone. They are about fulfilling a greater purpose. Those who are called into new seasons are not simply being blessed. They are being positioned to be a blessing to others. What once felt like a private journey of endurance and refinement suddenly becomes a testimony meant to inspire and lead. The lessons learned in the waiting are now meant to be shared. The wisdom gained is now meant to be poured out. This is why a shift is not just about an individual. It is about God's larger plan being set into motion. The urgency of the shift requires full surrender. There is no room for half-hearted commitment or partial obedience. When God says move, the only right response is movement. Delaying out of fear, doubt, or attachment to the past risks forfeiting the blessing that has been prepared. But for those who step forward in faith, trusting in God's perfect plan, the shift leads not just to a change in circumstances, but to a deeper, richer experience of His presence and purpose. The waiting is over. The time is now. The only question that remains is whether one is ready to step into what has already been set in motion.